he just had a slide that basically, if you're going to fall from a great height, gives you more time to reflect on the way down. So when we were traveling this summer from Powell River to Vancouver for the short course, Ian and I decided to make a road trip. And this became our excellent adventure. Now, if you understand a little bit about Powell River, you know that you get a couple ferries and a long drive. So we had about 4 hours together. And during that time, it wasn't lost on either of us that we were going to talk. Like, how many of you took a trip, like drove here for the conference? So if you had some time in the car, did you have a colleague with you? No. Okay. So those of you that you did, you could feel sort of the synergy that was happening in the car. At some point, we got through dead zones where the Wi-Fi didn't work, and we had to talk to each other. And so the interesting thing that shouldn't be lost on anyone here is that when we landed yesterday, Ian looked at me, just so excited. He's laughing because I told him I was going to bring it up. He says, "Whoa, that was quick. Next time we're flying." So you can appreciate the fact that it's 15 minutes versus 4 hours. And when you get into a road trip, especially with two educators that have some common, that actually really, I would say that Ian's brain is the opposite of my brain, and I think it really makes a good full circle. And so a lot of the chunks that I hit is the stuff that I don't hit, he's hitting. And I think that's where then we start having a thoughtful conversation around what can we do.
And one of the conversations we're having involved success in school. One of the big things I've been working on for a while is trying to figure out ways to help show what success in the schools look like, from use of portfolios in particular, descriptive feedback specifically, and also that mindset when working with mental wellness, that sometimes success in school doesn't necessarily have to involve the classroom. But that becomes tricky because that's very non-traditional in terms of what scholastic success is. That made us come back to what's our why? Well, for both of us, we would fully agree that it always comes down to the kids in general. Now, more specifically, we've got one example of my son who is very much more, having a connectivity issue, who is very much more typical of the ones that you see not in the classroom, but in the grade hall, in the hallways, figuring out ways to go home, all those pieces mixed up together. But he's not the only one.
When you look at, but even when you look at his son's my student as well. I'm his principal, and so we have that overlapping piece, right? And then when we look at this here is my volleyball team, and this is one of the things that you might know in terms of my involvement. I always try to get some sort of extracurricular piece. It has been a lot of volleyball. And when we look at this group, you think these are the highest performing kids. Most of these were grade 12s last year. And up until a certain point, I thought we were going to graduate them all, and it turned out that one of these girls didn't graduate last year. She's grade 12, should have, was very capable. And so then we started reflecting on what's going on here. Like, because part of our goal really is exactly this, is we want all our kids to be able to graduate. We want to celebrate it, we want to shoot off the cannons, and we were like, ooh, go and take those proper next steps, right? And do that with dignity. And so I had a girl that's in that crowd that actually, we were dealing with her after in the summer, commiserating about, gosh, I wish what could have, and what were the roadblocks. And so that's one of the things, it was so fresh at the time too, because it just happened, and then we got in the car and we're driving, right?
And it brought back that aspect of honoring the fact. For some kids, 13 years in a school is a success. We should be able to honor that. We should be able to help them get out. So that brought us into some of the thinking. What if there were no restrictions? Now, one of my always reflection pieces is creativity. Does it need something to overcome in order to be successful? Well, in this mindset as we were having the drive, we said, no barriers. What if there were no restrictions? What could we do? What might it look like? And again, coming back to a little bit of the why.
So you might not know this about me too. I'm a math teacher, and so, or have been, and still continue. And one of the things that when we started looking at the numbers in Powell River, about 180 grads, and if we were able to make differences, even in just the lives of two of those students, that's a 1% difference from an 80 to an 81, or a 70 to a 71, or a 90 to a 91, whatever that is. But that's just two kids we got to help. And we showed you two kids that we think we could help. What if we could help with a few more? And so when we started to think about what are the roadblocks to graduation, what are reasons that kids can't get through, and that's when we started to really be impactful. And then when you think too, if we have a 75% grad rate or whatever, there's a lot of kids that are hanging there going, well, why not, right? And what can we do differently? And so it really became, we were kind of thinking, what can be done? Who is it? What's the roadblocks? And so we started to pull these apart, and I think that's where...
And pulling apart a little bit made me reflect upon my own life as a student, where in my school, we had a cohort of 120 grade 8s, 60 graduated.
Well, this isn't my numbers, these are Ian's.
Yeah, this one's
because I wouldn't be here if that was my numbers.
But this was the good old days of education, as it were. And I mean, people say, well, what happened to the other 60? Well, I know on Facebook earlier today, I just sent a message to one of them because he's just celebrating another anniversary of sobriety, because life was really hard. School was hard. It was a challenge. We needed to overcome some of that challenge.
So we started talking a little bit more too, and we thought, what are some of the best strategies in terms of student success? We've heard a lot of them earlier from Peter DeWitt when we talked about impact. What are some of those most impactful ways of delivering curriculum so that we can put learners at the forefront? And we started thinking about project-based learning. We started thinking about kids having a voice. And we were also thinking, like, hopefully somebody's going to do this for us, right? Well, we realized that might not be the case, right?
Much like the movie Waiting for Superman. If you're waiting for somebody to come in and rescue you, you're going to be waiting a long time. So we needed to look at what we've been already thinking about, what we've already been doing, and maybe move forward with that. And a little bit with my own little crazy pathways, looking at personalized learning, portfolios, mental wellness, looking at this as maybe another pathway for personalized learning journeys, using two of my favorite things, portfolios and some project-based learning. Because there is a big detour, Mr. Math teacher.
Yeah, math. That was one. That was the reason that one young lady that didn't graduate. It was her math. It was her math course. And it turns out too that we have a number of other students that are probably in that similar situation. And when we looked at the new curriculum, one of the things that came out was history of math. I thought, well, I'm waiting. Hopefully somebody's going to take a look at this. And we thought, no one's going to take a look at it. It's got to be us right now. And so that's when we started thinking, well, can we pull it apart? Let's have a look at it. Let's look at some pieces around this. I mean, I'm a math teacher. Gosh, we should be able to do this, right? And so we had, as I said, we had 9 hours together. So we were starting to pull this apart.
And that's where we came up to thinking about some personalized portfolio project-based learning. It's getting to be too many P's, so trying to keep it short as possible. But essentially looking at a cohort of a grade 11 group, because looking at whether it's the regular dogwood, the adult dogwood, or anything else, that Math 11 is one of the barriers. So we're looking at tearing some of those down. At the same time, I was having a grade 6 student who was struggling with it, so I was already starting to work on something for that student and that family in order to help them have a blended program where I want him in school. He doesn't always necessarily have to be in the classroom, but how do we still keep academic rigor in place where he can show his learning, in this case it's another boy, and in order to be a successful student. So for that, we looked at Math 11, and where some of the thinking went down to was looking at history math, as Bill said. Our distance learning program wasn't looking at it, our Partners in Education program wasn't looking at it. It hadn't existed yet, in part because it's new. And instead we're looking at breaking it down so that there's an exploration component, an activity, and the focus becomes on descriptive feedback in order to move forward. So starting off, of course, with the big ideas. That way there's also that student choice in terms of what do I want to encounter first, what do I need to deal with. It's not about doing them in necessarily lockstep order, because there is that ability to have some choice. And then from there, having those methodologies to get some of the content in, giving some video options, giving some reading options, and looking at other ways to do it. One of my son's big frustrations with the distance learning program is that he couldn't stand the person who was delivering the content on the video that he had to watch. The voice was grating my ears like a cheese grater, Dad. Hard to say, well, just suck it up. But he also came forward with a solution. Dad, why don't they just have that person speak, but do it voice to text? That way I can grab the text, have one of the computer readers read it to me in a voice that I can deal with better. Bring in a solution to a problem on his own. And at the same time, that's what we want to do, is also activate some of that thinking of some of these students that can be very deep and very powerful, and give some choice into, starting off with a bare skeleton, having them say, hey, look at this resource, consider that video. Those activities suck. I want to do it this way. And being able to give that feedback where, yes, that's going to be able to address the question and have us move forward. So, as the first example, because we are here because we are starting to plot this in September, and it got going much faster than I was certainly expecting. because while we had the ideas, we also finally had a school that was willing to host it, because it's one nice thing to say, oh, we're going to do this via home. It's another thing to then be able to say, nope, we're giving you actual credit for a transcript. I can't do that in a K-7 school, but Bill can in grade 11. So looking at tools and technologies as catalysts for mathematical development. My son said, yeah, I got that one, Dad. Piece of cake, here's your answer. Little sparks, okay? Calculator versus an app. He hates the fact that he wasn't allowed to bring a calculator to school. He hates that my daughters have had to buy $140 calculators when there's a 99-cent app out there. Done and done, Dad. Oh, okay, no. Give him some descriptive feedback, quick feedback, good thesis statement, giving him some praise to start off with. And acknowledging, yeah, disruptors, catalysts, mathematical development, absolutely. You got that part. However, I gotta wonder, why would an app be better than a calculator? I even said, I did a quick search for an infographic. Couldn't find one, because I was gonna use that as an example for him. No exemplar, why don't you create one? So he went away and then he created a little infographic comparing the Texas Instrument calculator that everyone seems to have and the app. From price point to usability, bringing all the little parts about why the app could be a strong catalyst in the regular classroom and make math more achievable, because even he wondered, is the price of a calculator keeping some students from signing up for a math class, knowing that they got to fork out $140 to $200 for a tool that they have to have for the class? So he was doing some deep thinking as well, and that becomes part of that descriptive feedback loop, which we can see in the portfolios, where we see the journey go from an action statement, essentially, even though he was hoping that was all he'd have to do, some feedback, and then some development and growth that way. And then being able to look at what the grading looks like. I mean, in my mind, we use descriptive feedback and we're done. But they're also able to build in standards and exemplars to compare the work to, get to focus on the journey of learn, not the final product. Am I expecting my son, who has been disconnected from school throughout his career off and on, to then create a 1,000-word biopic essay that's spectacular? And no, because that's not his style. But he is able to synthesize complex ideas into easy to follow statements, or sometimes simple ideas into hard to follow statements, but that's what our long walks are for. But being able to then focus on what the student is able to achieve, did they achieve it, and then give a letter, or standing granted, or what's the current one?
Requirements met.
Requirements met.
Yep.
Whatever feels right in order to get them out. So that's where we're trying to push right now. It's not just us doing it though. We are hoping that this just starts to fuel some of the fire and get more of an inquiry group going. We know some of the activities aren't good. I'm already getting feedback from other math experts around the country who have done many more thousands of hours thinking about this than I have in order to bring some things in. We're still sticking with the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It won't be a bogus learning journey, but we're also looking at this as a bit of an open source ideation. This is something that can work in pretty much any school, especially rural schools where it's sometimes difficult to offer a huge course selection. For those students who have a tough time getting into the school, let alone the classroom, and still being able to treat their learning with dignity and respect. You're meeting the expectations of a provincially recognized course. You're getting credit for it from a provincially recognized secondary school. It's on your transcript. Congratulations.
And
that
I think
is moving with dignity.
I think too, the final bit too is really around if this is going to be able to be, if that's what two parts. One is if that's where the roadblock is, and that's really where the journey has to start, right? And us solving that step. And then the other part is if it's really going to be working for something like math, you know, we're thinking that this could be working for other pieces as well. And so we encourage you to go out and try that. And you know, we're Ian especially is going to be making the work that he has available, and certainly from my school perspective, we're making it available to our kids and making sure that that these opportunities are afforded to them. And if there are other these are our expertise. I'm a math guy, so that's my wheelhouse. If there's others that are English or something else that we think is a roadblock, let's pull some of those out, because you know, the more we can make that ability to cross the stage of reality, I think is really upon us to do it, and we can't wait for somebody else. So that's why we did this.
Please stay in touch.